No strings attached. That's what this series is about. We've been on it for 2 weeks. This is our third week. And it is about letting go of those strings that hold us back. And so the title of today's message, if you're taking notes or if you're taking mental notes, is called Coming Alive. I know some people out there, it just helps to like break things down. But it's called about coming alive. And what we're talking about is living out your unique purpose. The purpose in which God made you to live. The reason why you exist. You see, you don't just give yourself meaning by the things that you do, or by the job that you have, or by how much money you have, or by your looks, or by your clothes, because eventually all that stuff fades away. God has given us an internal, intrinsic purpose. And we're talking about living that out. And all of us have tried to live that out, except there is this thing going on, and it's called the puppet master. That we are our own puppet master. You see, the thing with puppets, and we've been using the illustration here of this puppet with the little jacked up arm going on over here. And the thing with this puppet is that he can only go the distance of its strings. It can only go as far as the strings, and the strings control this puppet. Okay, and every time this puppet, for example, wants to put his arm down, well, I'm going to put his arm up. Except this puppet's not really that great. It doesn't really work that stuff. Justin Timberlake's a little rusty now. But the thing with puppets is that they control us. They maneuver us. And what this translates to today, this funny illustration translates to today, is that we are often set back because of the strings in our life. So, Carlos, what are these strings? What are you talking about by strings? So here's what we're talking about. These strings are strings of fear, of insecurity. How often do you feel like everybody's going to think something about you? How often are you afraid to go out because of people's opinions? So strings of insecurity, of doubt. You feel like you get into a relationship and you doubt it. You doubt the love. You doubt the trust. Or you doubt God. You can't serve God fully because you have so much doubt because you've been let down so many times before. Insecurity and strings of pain, of your past experiences and things that have happened in your life that have caused pain and these triggers of pain. To where when you see a family, a happy family, that's a trigger because you never had that. So all these strings, see, they keep us back and they set us back. You see, you might not even know this, but your strings can keep you back from getting promoted at work, from being in a healthy marriage, from being in a healthy relationship, from being financially stable. And even this, your strings can hold you back from having a vibrant relationship with God because something always gets in the way. You see, I love in the book of Psalms in the Bible, so many times we read about David who had these emotional issues, sometimes with God. He would be angry at God and would say, God, why have you forgotten about me? And it's okay for us, listen, it's okay for us to express to God our emotions. That's sometimes the way that we get rid of strings. But here's the idea that I really want you to grasp is this, that God created you to be free. God created you to be free and to fully live out your life abundantly and to go after it and to have such a healthy, pure heart to where you can sleep at night without thinking, oh man, I'm so jacked up, I'm so messed up, look what I did, what I didn't do. God wants you to be free. Howard Thurman said this. He said, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. In other words, don't just go to college for a job. Don't just work for a job. Although all this stuff may help the economy, or don't just get married for the sake of a relationship. It says don't do stuff for the sake of doing stuff. Don't just get a job. Don't just make more money. Don't just become successful. Become alive. Because then when you are alive, it gives meaning to everything else. It gives meaning to your life and what you're living for. So now you're not just living for a job. You're living out your purpose. And what the world needs is more people that are passionate about what they're doing and who they're doing it for. See, but letting go of your strings, why doesn't okay, Carlos, this sounds easy, but why isn't everybody doing this? Because listen, letting go of your strings takes courage. It just takes courage. Because when you start dealing with these strings, it's a very uncomfortable process. When you start dealing with your insecurity, when you start dealing with your pain, and you start to dig out these roots of unforgiveness, it starts stirring things up and it makes people uncomfortable. So what do we do? What do people do to not let go of their strings? Easy. They make a bubble. They put themselves in a box away from the things that are going to pull on these strings. I know, for example, in my life, a couple of years ago, I went through this personal depressive moment where I just felt, no one liked me. Everybody thought this negative views of me. And what I did is I just isolated myself. And although I thought I was only harming myself, I was actually harming the people around me. And it was all in my head. Until I had to confront it. I had to realize, you know what, God, this is not how you created me to be. And these strings, little did I know, had drawn me closer and closer and closer to where I couldn't move far. And so in your own life, we are going to get rid of this bubble. Little by little, in this journey, we are going to break free. You know what I'm thinking right now on the spot? That we're probably going to come back to this series in a couple of months and just say where we're at. Just name it differently and talk about just where we're at now. Have we let go of these strings? Because you see, it's easier to accept your strings than to let go and move forward. See, you never know. This is tweet, worthy. Okay, I want you to just tweet this out. You never know what God has for you until you can fully step out and trust Him. I'll say that again. You never know what God has for you until you can fully step out and trust Him. If you give God a little bit of your life, then, theoretically, God can only use you a little bit. But if you fully trust God, if you immerse yourself in God, you say, you know what, God, I got tons of strings. And you can just step out in God, and you can just step forward into your relationship with God. You watch what God will do through your life. So let's get back to Gideon, okay? Let's bring out the Bible. So Gideon was this teenager who was all bound by strings. He was the weakest of his clan, and he was the least in his family. And he was called by God to be a leader. See, Israel had become suppressed by the tribes surrounding them. And all of a sudden, these tribes, for about 6 years, they had come and taken their food and starved them. And so here he was hiding in a wine press because he was afraid when he was gathering some food. And God called him to be a leader. And the next thing God called him to do is to tear down idols. Tear down all the idols that you have accepted from the tribes surrounding you. Tear them down and acknowledge me as the true God. And this upset the people. Every time you mess with people's ideology, way of thinking, it's gonna mess them up. So they got mad. So we read about this in the book of Judges chapter 6. So now we're going to continue our reading. All right, so read with me below. Right here we have the scriptures for you. This is right after he destroyed the idols. Soon afterwards, the armies of Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east formed an alliance against Israel. This was their annual raid, and crossed the Jordan, camping in the valley of Jezreel. Then the Spirit of the Lord, the Spirit of God, clothed Gideon. It came on Gideon with power. At that point, Gideon, he blew a ram's horn as a call to arms, and the men of the clan of Bezer came to him. He also sent messengers throughout Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and the Naphtali, summoning their warriors, and all of them responded. All these people needed was someone to step out of their strings. There were warriors in this tribe. There was warriors in this place, and someone needed to step out. You see, this was their annual raid. The Midianites, this was what they did every year. So this was the 7th year. They're about to invade Israel, take their food. A lot of times Israel, they just didn't even harvest anymore because they were so used to just being abused that a lot of people just starved. See, this was their annual raid. And the funniest thing about this is that all these tribes were equal. Okay, they were all twerps compared to mighty Egypt. See, it wasn't Egypt doing this that, gave rights for Israel to be afraid. It was all the surrounding tribes that did this. How often do we feel so small when yet all the circumstances in our life are really not that big, but they feel giant. For some of you guys, you have maybe been in a job for a little bit and you feel like, man, everybody is worth more in this job than I am. They're all peers. You're just as talented. You're just as good. That's just an example. So they were coming to collect the harvest. Except this time, here they are. All right, guys, this is our annual rate. Let's do this. It's going to be easy, okay? It's like stealing candy from a baby. Except this time, something would be different. Somebody, somewhere, got past their strings and trusted God. I love what the Bible says here, where the Spirit of God came on Gideon with power. The Spirit of God came on Gideon with power. Listen, when you have the power of God on your life, that means when you have a relationship with Jesus and Jesus is inside of your heart, plus you are determined to have faith and trust in God, there are no limits to the things that God can do through your life. When there is someone who is letting go of their strings, there is no limits to where God can take them. No matter how unintelligent you are, no matter how unattractive you may think you are, no matter what it is. Listen, if you're watching out there and you are a teenager and you just feel like you're just not going to go anywhere in life because of your social status, because mom and dad were poor, and grandma and grandpa were poor, and you're going to be poor, or you're going to be dumb, or whatever the situation is in your life. Listen, if you can step out and trust God, there are no limits to what God can do through your life. There's no telling what God can do, no matter your background. Nothing can contain. When God is in you and you trust God, nothing can contain your potential. Cutting your strings starts with a resolve. It's not going to be, a 12-step process. It's going to be a journey in your life. But I'm not talking about a 12-step process here. I'm talking about a resolve. I'm talking about a resolve in your heart, a resolve in your mind that says, you know what, God, I am going to trust you. I'm going to cut these strings. God, that mentality, that puppet master mentality may still be there. I may still feel like those strings are there. But that's just the mentality that you've been wired to have. Yes, it will take time, but do you even want to be free? See, you might lose your strings, but the puppet master mentality could still be there. Thoughts of doubt, thoughts of fear, all those things could still be there. But if you step out in God, if you step out and say, you know what, God, I'm just going to make a resolve in my heart that I'm going to let go of these strings. You keep trusting God. This is why the journey, and this is why Christianity is referred to as the faith. Because it doesn't just take faith to step out and believe in God at this one point. It's a continual life of faith. You see, many of y'all don't know the story, but we have had bad news several times in our life. Evidence, I don't know if y'all can tell from my hand. You probably wondered what's going on with my hand. But to me, this is a symbol of faith. In my young journey with God, I had a tragic car accident, almost lost my life. And I had every reason to doubt God. I had every reason to walk away from God because I'm living for God fully. And yet I chose to continue. Imagine what would have happened. I would have still had a jacked up hand and I still would have been probably who knows where. But because I chose to believe in God, God kept using me and training me and teaching me new skills. So I want to encourage you to keep trusting God. Let's go back to our story of Gideon. Then Gideon said to God, after the armies came to Gideon, after all these awesome things came, after the Spirit of God came upon Gideon and he blew the ram's horn and all these people came, then Gideon said to God, if you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel, as you promised, prove it to me in this way. Wait a minute, isn't that what you're supposed to do before you blow the ram's horn? Before you get everybody to come? And so here's the sign that he wants God to do. God, I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. The threshing floor was where they beat out wheat. It was not into a wine press. The threshing floor was just a hard piece of flat land where they threw all the bundles of wheat and they just mashed it. And they just mashed all the wheat until all the corn, the wheat corn, came flying everywhere. So he said, I will put, and I'm telling you that for a reason. I'll get back to it. I will put a wool fleece on the threshing floor tonight. If the fleece is wet with dew in the morning, but the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised. And that is just what happened. God honored that request and God did it. When Gideon got up early the next morning, he squeezed the fleece and wrung out, he squeezed it and wrung out a whole bowlful of water. Then Gideon said to God, please don't be angry with me. You see, he knew like, oh man, I'm putting God in a corner here. I keep asking you. It's okay. God was like, listen, I understand your fear. I understand your doubt. But Gideon says this, please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece, that same fleece, for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry while the ground around it is wet with dew. So that night, God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. You see, there was a significant moment that was taking place here. God was giving Gideon a personal, private symbol, a sign that God is with him, that God is for him, that God is by him. And the threshing floor represented the beating that was going to take place to the wheat. So here's a sign. It says God put the wool fleece on the threshing floor. See, the wool came from sheep. And it was a symbol that was happening thousands of years later where the Lamb of God would be put through a beating on the threshing floor where he would be stripped and beaten and broken and crucified. And as a sign, Jesus, instead of wringing out water, he would wring out his blood as a symbol and as a sign that he is for you, that he is with you, that he loves you, that he wants victory in your life. See, but even after all the bravery that Gideon had, the bravery to blow the ram's horn, the bravery to call everybody to fight back, even after knowing and hearing God and everyone that showed up, he still doubted God. And it's okay. Listen, for some of you that continue doubting that God is by your side, that God is with you, it's okay. See, because God has already made himself evident. It wasn't just a private personal sign for Gideon. The Son of God made himself a sign on the cross to the whole world, that we can look to him and see him as a sign that he is for us. How often are we sure about something? How often do you know that God has put something in your heart, yet the doubt settles in? The strings keep pulling in your life. So what causes this? Okay, let's think about what causes these strings to really become alive. Two things. The critical inner voice in our mind. It's this critical inner voice that says, you are not pretty enough, you're not handsome enough, you're not smart enough, you're fat, you're ugly, you're never going to be successful. Once a failure, always a failure. You see, it is said that about 80% of our thoughts every day are negative. All these voices in our mind, all these voices are just negative. It's that critical inner voice. And the second thing is that these are the lies of the enemy. This is why the devil is known as the father of lies. Because all he has to do to control you and make you do what he wants and make you grow distant from God is just harp on your strings, harp on your experiences, harp on your pain, your insecurity, and your doubt. He just plays on it. How often have you just kind of been driving around or in class or just not been thinking about anything, and all of a sudden you get stirred up with some emotion of hate or fear or doubt? How often have you just been chilling and then you just feel like, does God even exist? There he is playing with your analytical mind, the enemy causing you to live out these strings. And it's all in that puppet master mentality. Man, that stinks. So how do we be free? How do we combat that? How do we move past that? Well, here are the three things that you need to know found in this story of Gideon. Number one, God had to tell Gideon that I am by your side. I am with you. So the first thing is you have to know that God is by your side, that God is with you. That's why Jesus says, I will go to my Father, but lo, I am with you, even to the ends of the earth. Jesus had to reassure his disciples that he was with them. Because many of them, 11 out of the 12, well, actually all of them, would have had a brutal, brutal persecution. 11 out of the 12 would actually be killed. John, they tried to kill him several times, but he just didn't die. So I guess that counts as a tried to death. But anyway, but they needed to know that Jesus was with them. The second thing that you need to know is you need to know what God says about you. Not what your friends think about you, not what your parents think about you, not what your classmates think about you, not what your teacher thinks about you, but what God thinks about you. What God says about you. So God tells Gideon, I am with you, O mighty warrior. God assured Gideon that you are a mighty warrior. I've called you to lead. I called you to lead an army and go do it. See, when you can stand firm on the fact that God is with us and what God says about us, you can move forward. The third thing is, and this is kind of the hardest things, okay? This was even for me, it was the hardest thing because I don't come from a background that's like perfect. The third thing is you have to embrace how God made you. You have to embrace how God made you. Some of you are fighting too hard who you are. Quit trying to get rid of yourself and replace it with Kim Kardashian. All right? You are who you are, called to be how you are, the personality you have, the characteristics that you have. God has made you to be a distinct person for a distinct reason and for a unique purpose. Embrace who you are. Some of you just need to get rid of some of the people you follow on social media because all you're constantly doing is comparing yourself. Well, they just got a car. Well, I don't have a car. Well, they just got a new house. Well, I don't have a new house. Well, they look this gorgeous. Well, I don't look this gorgeous. Well, they can speak so eloquently. Well, I can't speak so eloquently. Quit comparing yourself. Embrace who you are. Embrace what God says about you. Know that God is by your side and just step forward. Just move forward. Okay? Go after God. If you do not know Jesus in this way, listen, the reason why we're doing this is so that you can know Jesus in this way. The reason why we're doing this is not for money. We don't care about money. The reason why we're doing all this is because we want people to live free. We want to connect with those that do not have a relationship with God, that do not know God in this way. I want to invite you to click on the Know Jesus button at the end of this. Right after this, we're going to play some music. And we're just going to allow you to just take some time to just meditate on what God is doing in your heart, what God is doing in your life. Join Vibrant Life. Vibrant Life, after you click the Know Jesus button, Vibrant Life is a couple of week program where we're going to send you a Bible, give you a reading plan, show you some music that you can listen to that's going to build your walk with God. And we want to connect with you. Share your story. Listen, we love to pray for the people that God is blessing through this ministry. So email us at story@yourchurch.life, and we'd love to hear what God is doing in your life, the things that God is doing in your life through this series. God bless you. Connect with us on social media once again. I so look forward to our next live stream. Invite a friend. God bless you.